This talk is child safe, so if you have any kiddos around you, I'm not going to be mentioning any top secret parent things that they cannot hear, so it's perfectly okay to have them around. All right, let's start with a couple of terms. Intrigued, ooh, that's a good one. All right, we talk about fear. We feel afraid when we're in a situation where we think we're not safe. There is a threat to our safety, like, for example, a tiger. I don't know how many of you have faced a tiger recently, but if I opened my door and there was a tiger there, I would be afraid. I would think this is a situation where I could get hurt. Anxiety is a little bit different, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that today. I'm sorry if you were hoping we were going to have a whole talk about tigers tonight. Not today. Anxiety is when you're thinking about a future event, something that has not yet happened, and you're feeling concerned about it, right? When we think about stress, stress is really when we're in a situation and we think, I'm being asked to do more than I really can. This situation is more challenging than I can handle. I don't want us to sort of think that all anxiety is bad. Anxiety actually can be really helpful in lots of different ways. It can help keep us safe. It can help us achieve things. It can help us focus on our goals for the future. It's often associated with something that's new or different. Think about first day of school, or hearing thunder, or if you had never had the hiccups before in your life, and then all of a sudden you had a violent sound erupt from your body. If you hiccuped for the very first time and you had no idea what it was, you probably would be uncertain about that. Like, what is this? Is this dangerous? You might be on Dr. Google, like looking this up. Is this something deadly, right? We often feel anxious when we're in a situation that we are uncertain about, when we can't predict the future, when we don't know what's coming. So, for example, waiting for a decision from college, waiting for results from a medical test can be associated with uncertainty. And most importantly, I want to recognize that anxiety is something that can be managed. I love talking about anxiety because it can be treated. Not that we can cure anxiety where we never ever feel anxious again, but it can be made into a much more manageable situation. There may be different levels of anxiety that we experience throughout the day, and not all stress is bad. There are times where we want to have a really, really low level of stress, and feel free to pop in the chat. When is a time for you when you don't want to have any stress at all? You want to be incredibly relaxed, nothing on your mind at all. Are there any times when that would be a useful experience for you to have? Can anyone think of a time when they're like, I don't want to be stressed or anxious about anything. I just want to be relaxed. Early in the morning, ooh, nice. Bedtime, perfect. When you're falling asleep, you don't want your brain to throw a bunch of new thoughts your way and say, here are some things to panic about. You want your brain to be able to shut down. People will sometimes say, when I'm on vacation, I don't really want to be thinking about stressful things. I want to be relaxed. I want to just be cooling down. Are there any situations where a super high level of anxiety and stress would be helpful for us? When would that actually be helpful? Ooh, bath time for baby. I like that. Bedtime, perfect. When do we want a high level of stress? Is it ever adaptive, like helpful for us to have? When we're in danger, right? So my tiger situation, if your house is on fire, please don't be casual about it. Don't say, well, I'll head out in a couple minutes. I'm just going to finish this chapter that I'm on, or maybe I'll finish playing the game. If there's an emergency situation, we need to be able to run quickly. We need to be able to leap into action. The problem is when our stress level is not right for the situation that we're in. If you're trying to study for a test and you are falling asleep, or you're trying to take a test and your brain says, you're going to fail, you're probably not going to do well in either situation. Maybe you have some friends or family members who you can think of who live at one end or another end of the stress scale. Someone who always seems relaxed all the time or always seems stressed. There is no amount of therapy that will turn a low stress person into a high stress person, or a high stress person into a low stress person. We're looking for what is the range of stress that you or your child can handle. So if your child is in panic mode, they're probably not going to do very well in school. They're probably not going to do very well on their sports team. they're probably not going to do very well in their audition. So we're going to talk mostly about strategies for reducing stress, but we'll talk a couple minutes if we have time, if you have a child who they don't seem concerned enough about the situation. They're procrastinating or they're putting things off. There are lots of different types of anxiety. These are some of the most common diagnoses. Separation anxiety usually shows up for little kids, and it's a fear of being away from your parents or your caregivers. When you worry, something bad will happen to me. I don't want to be away from you. What if I get hurt, or what if I get sick and you're not there? This will often show up, at drop-offs for preschool or kindergartners. I just want you to stay with me. I don't want you to leave me alone at bedtime. Social anxiety usually starts to show up a little bit more towards our late elementary school age, kind of middle school age. Social anxiety is where you feel highly stressed in a situation with peers, but you wish that you felt more comfortable. This isn't the same thing as being an introvert and craving time by yourself and saying, I feel most relaxed when I'm on my own. It's just kind of hard work when I'm with other people. This is saying, I'm worried people will think of me as weird or will have negative thoughts about me. Generalized anxiety is a bit more, lots of different types of thoughts. Oh, will we cover stress about social interactions with peers? Absolutely. And by the way, it's really normal to have questions about what other people are thinking about you. It only becomes a problem if it reaches a certain level of distress. It's normal for us to wonder, what are other people thinking about me? Or I wonder if someone's having a negative thought about me. It becomes a problem if we start to avoid situations, right, where we think we might encounter other people. Generalized anxiety shows up often a little bit more in the sort of high school and among adults. Lots of fears in lots of different areas. Fears about the weather, fears about bad things happening, fears about getting sick. It sort of almost kind of shows up in lots of different dimensions at the same time. Phobia is like a very specific worry or fear. I'm worried about getting shots or injections, or one of our favorite things to treat in my practice are puppy phobias, fear of dogs. We get to actually bring dogs in, and that's quite fun. The common thread that underlies all of these different things is avoidance. If you think a situation is going to be hard or horrible or unpleasant, who wants to go towards that situation? Right? Imagine, I don't know if any of you have ever cleaned out your fridge and you smell something that you're like, I think this has gone bad. It's become a science experiment in the back of the fridge. It's growing 3 different colors of mold. If you open that container and it smelled terrible, you probably wouldn't say, let me take a big bite of this. Our brain teaches us to avoid situations that we perceive of as hard or uncomfortable. That makes a lot of sense. The challenge is when we avoid things that we either want or need to face, that's when we want to have some different or alternative strategies. I love this quote, Mr. Rogers, special place in my heart for him. Part of limiting avoidance is making space for different emotions, right? So he said, people have said don't cry to other people for years and years. And all that it has ever meant is, I'm too uncomfortable when you show your feelings, don't cry. I'd rather have them say, go ahead and cry. I'm here to be with you. Has anyone ever given any of you the advice, don't worry about it? Or if you're sad, just cheer up, look on the bright side. I'm curious if that advice has ever worked for anybody before. Someone tells you not to stress. Does it take away your stress? That's never worked for me before. Nope. Instead of running away and trying to convince our kids not to be anxious, let's teach them how to manage that feeling when it shows up. And let's also teach them that it's really, really normal to have this emotion. About 1 out of every 4 people over the course of their lifetime will meet criteria for an anxiety disorder. 100% of the population, every single continent, every single culture, every single person in the world feels anxious some of the time. It's a universal emotion, one of the few emotions that is universally experienced. So let's teach our kids that it's normal and that we have tools and strategies to manage it. When we're thinking about anxiety, we can look at it as a combination of our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. Oh, I love this. Just relax. When someone tells you just relax, that has never helped me to calm down. Do we have any roller coaster fans here? Who looks at this and is like, oh, yeah, really? You're very brave. Oh my gosh, Molly. Okay. That's not how I feel about roller coasters. Here's actual photo of me looking at this roller coaster. That's what I look like. Here's what I think when I look at the roller coaster. I am going to fall off that thing and I'm going to splat like a pancake. I look at this and I think that is very dangerous. So those are my thoughts in my thought bubble. If you asked me to go on this, I really don't think, I can't think of any amount of money that would convince me to go on it. Maybe if you were like, we'll cure all diseases, maybe I'd consider it, but it would be like, I would have to think about it. I would probably run the other direction away from this roller coaster. If you're like, ooh, this looks fun, I'd be like, nope. And I would be terrified of it. All right, so for those of you who like roller coasters, here's what you might look like looking at the same thing. You're like, yes, amazing. You're not thinking about falling off it. You're like, this is going to be amazing. I can't wait. You're probably going to be feeling excited, and maybe you're going to be first in line for this thing, right? So what's different about this? It's not actually a different roller coaster. It's just two people having a very different experience. Since we can't change the emotion, you can't tell me, stop being scared of this, or you couldn't tell someone, don't be excited about this really fun ride. We can focus on changing our thoughts and changing our behavior. So let's start with some thought-based strategies. And I love this. If you're talking to your kids, you can be like, this is an amazing trick. You can actually change the thoughts that are in your own brain. Here are some of the thoughts that I've heard from my clients. I am going to fall during tryouts. I don't even want to go to soccer tryouts because I'm certain I'm going to make a complete fool of myself, right? I'm going to fall in front of people. Everyone's going to think I'm an idiot. I'm going to fail that quiz that I have coming up. And very rarely does the worry stop there. I'm going to fail this quiz. If I fail this quiz, I'm going to fail this class. If I fail this class, I'm going to fail out of school. If I fail out of school, I'm going to fail at life. Anxious thoughts tends to scallop a little bit. They start in one place and then they kind of keep popping over to bigger and bigger worries. I've had clients tell me, I think my teacher hates me. They like everyone but me. They're targeting me. There's something about me that they don't like. I'm feeling really awful and I worry that I will always feel this way. And then this also question, like, is it just me? Am I the only one who feels this way? Everyone else seems super happy. Social media tends to show us a very biased view of things. I really don't know people who post about like a mediocre meal they had. Like, sandwich was fine. The Yelp review is usually, this was the most delicious meal I ever had in my life, or the service is terrible, do not go there, I do not recommend it. So if we're having these unhelpful thoughts, we can practice pairing them with a helpful thought. And rather than trying to convince ourselves everything is okay all of the time, we can think about it in the framework of a neutral thought or a positive thought. So for example, I'm going to fall during tryouts and everyone will think I'm an idiot. I've actually never fallen before while running a race. And if I did fall, what would I do? I guess I could just get back up again. So thinking like, what is the worst case scenario? How would I handle it? I guess it wouldn't actually be that bad. Instead of thinking I will fail this quiz, I will fail at everything, I've actually done well on my math quizzes and tests before. If I did fail, my teacher would help me. Rather than thinking my teacher hates me, thinking about what are the ways in which this teacher is nice. And if your teacher doesn't like you, it's one teacher in one class in 1 year. You'll figure it out. No one is going to like everything about you all of the time. It helps sometimes to recognize that a negative feeling we're having is temporary. Every feeling has a start point, a peak, its highest point, and an end point. So if you stub your toe really hard in the hallway, for a moment it's going to feel terrible. And then it's going to have its worst point. Wow, that really hurts. And then it will eventually start to feel better. So for example, if you have a child or like a student who's had panic attacks, say, are they permanent? Most panic attacks are about 15 minutes. Now, it may be 15 minutes where you feel like you're having a heart attack, not a pleasant experience, but recognizing this has an endpoint. If you have a child or student who says, I'm the only one who feels this way, there's actually a name for this. We call this anxiety. We have a vocabulary for this very reason. You can normalize this experience. I feel anxious sometimes too. I don't know exactly what you feel or whether we feel the exact same way, but recognizing that it's normal. Now, there are some really nice benefits of this approach. Unhelpful thought, helpful thought, but there are times where this strategy doesn't work for everybody. It's a little bit like getting into a game of ping pong. And you may have found yourself in this situation with your child before, right? They come to you with an anxious thought. I'm worried this terrible thing will happen. And then you're like, no, it won't. And they're like, but it could. And now you're actually playing ping pong back and forth with them. I don't want you to have to get into an argument to try to convince them that everything's going to work out. I also recognize that you can't promise that everything will be good all of the time. It's possible that the thing they're worried about might happen, even if it's unlikely. And we also can do this with ourselves, right? We have an anxious thought. We try to ignore it or convince ourselves this is not going to happen. So here is an alternative. Rather than fighting those anxious thoughts, we can actually acknowledge them and say, like, yeah, that could happen. Here are 4 ways of responding to an anxious thought. And if anyone thinks of an anxious thought where they're like, this does not work, I would love for you to challenge me today to see if you can find one that doesn't fit this. So the first response is, I'm feeling anxious about that. So let's pick a worry. What if I don't make friends at my new school? That's a really stressful thought. I would feel stressed too if I was going to a new school and had that concern. Another potential response, yeah, maybe that could happen. It could be that I don't make any friends at the school. What are the other possibilities? Maybe I make a few friends. Maybe I make a lot of friends. Saying the second sort of response, maybe so, allows for other possibilities to come in as well. There are times where we may have a worry. We can't predict the future. What if this really bad thing happens? What if I get sick? What if I fail? What if someone is mean to me? What if I don't get into the school that I wanted to get into? These questions may not be solved right away. We may need to wait for that information, or we may never know that information. What if my friend said that we were fine, but she actually was still mad at me? We are never going to be able to read this friend's mind. So instead, we can respond, I won't know that for sure, or I won't know that right now. And then I think this last one is for like a really stressful, really anxious thought. What if I get COVID and get really sick? That's a very scary thought. IWS is, it would stink. That would not be fun. I don't know anyone who's like, oh, everything about getting COVID was amazing and magical and wonderful. It's not a pleasant feeling. But thinking, how would I handle that situation? What if I did fail? I don't know anyone who's excited about failing. To say, that would be really hard, and I would get through it. Who would help? What resources do I have? Can anyone think of an anxious thought that they're like, these 4 affirmations don't apply? Ooh, bad guy breaking in and hurting them. Yeah, good question. You could say, yeah, a bad guy could break into our house, or someone could ring our doorbell and offer us $1 million. Like that also could happen, right? What are other things that could happen? The circus could come to town and we could go and have a really, watch a really fun show. By saying, yeah, it could happen. You're not fighting the thought. You could also go the route of, how old are you? And if your child is, 10, they'd say 10. You could say, you're 10 years old. How many times have we had a break-in in our house? For most people, that number is either very low or it hasn't yet happened. Sometimes we're worried about things that are very low likelihood events. And you could also use your own age. I'm not going to tell you my age today, but you could say, I'm so many years old. I have actually never had a break-in. So between your 10 years and my X number of years, we've lived for this long. Neither one of us have ever had a break-in. So it's possible that somebody could break in. But do we think that's what's probably going to happen? What are the other possibilities? We're just sort of like encouraging a little cognitive flexibility. Is there any other way to think about this situation? School shootings, super scary. Yes. And again, this is why I would tell you, don't promise them that they will be safe all the time, right? Because sometimes bad things happen. You can email me after the session, and I have some good resources to share with parents, talking with your kids about very difficult topics. I've had a lot of parents request, how do I talk to my kids about like the war in Ukraine? So I can share some resources with you after the call about some of the really scary stuff. But thank you for bringing that up. That is a scary thing to talk about, and scary for us to hear as parents too, right? So again, a couple of strategies for the cognitive or thought-based strategies. We're identifying this is an anxious thought. We can pair that thought with a positive thought or a neutral one, which is like, if the bad thing happened, I would figure it out. We can look at evidence for and against. How likely is this scary thing to happen? Do I have any evidence that contradicts it? This is a good one for like, what if I fail, or what if people are mean to me? We can look at our past experience. How often has this happened to me before? We can try some of those affirmations, and we can also practice just waiting it out. What happens if I don't do anything? What happens if I just sit with this thought? Will I be able to kind of keep going about my day while I'm also feeling anxious? Okay, so pivoting a little bit to some of the behavior-based strategies. These are things that we can do. So I am not a surfer. I am not coordinated enough to stand on a surfboard, but I have lived in some surfer-friendly areas. Not a lot of surfing happening in the greater Maryland area, but maybe if you go further out to the shore or Delaware. What happens if you're standing in the ocean and a giant wave comes your way? And like, let's say you're in the water, like waist deep in the water. Could you outrun the wave? Probably not. Like, it's hard to run on sand. It's hard to run when you're in the water. Could you stop the wave? Do any of you have superpowers? If you do, please tell me, because I would be honored to meet a real life superhero today. I personally couldn't stop a wave from happening. A surfer will tell you if a giant wave is coming their way and they don't think that they can actually get on top of the wave, they will do something really confusing. They will dive straight into the wave. And what happens when they do that is that they don't avoid the wave. They're not pretending it's not there. But when they do that, the wave passes over them and they're able to kind of come up on the other side without getting too hurt. Sometimes preventative strategies can work really well for anxiety, but what works even better is facing the stressful situation one small step at a time. So I want to hear from you guys a little bit, and you can type in the chat box. Are there ways that your child is brave? What are some of the things that they do, or children? What are some of the things that your child does where you're like, that was actually quite a brave thing that they did? I'm thinking about an example of like my child going to a brand new school, not knowing anybody and being willing to start that. Moving to a new state, great example. Trying something that's new. What else are things that your kids do that are brave? Going back to school after COVID. I don't know about you, this is my first global pandemic. I didn't know what to expect. Did you guys know like what to expect? No? Riding the bus every day in kindergarten, that is a brave kindergartner right there. I love that. I think I probably cried more than my kindergartner did when they got on the bus for the first time. Waterworks, just tears. My kid was like, it's fine. Your daughter dances on stage. She's super brave to do that. Actually, for a lot of people, public speaking or kind of being in front of an audience is a bigger fear than pretty much anything else. So your dancer is very brave. Living with epilepsy, rock climbing. You have some brave kiddos, right? You can remind them about this. You can say, you are scared sometimes, but let me also recognize that you are brave in some of these situations too, right? And feel free to keep adding stuff in the chat box. I love seeing all of these brave things that your kids do. And also you being brave as you're watching them rock climbing, right? Dancing, managing a pretty complicated medical condition. That takes a lot of bravery on our part as parents. It helps to recognize that different situations bring with them different levels of challenge. So if you're afraid of public speaking or presenting in front of the class, maybe when you're at home playing video games, you have absolutely no stress. On the 0 to 10 scale, you are at a 0, you're very comfortable. Talking with your parents about the presentation is just the tiniest little bit stressful. Running through the presentation by yourself, maybe a little bit harder. We look for strategies that are in the like 3 to 5 range to start out of 10. So if you notice your child avoiding something and you think they should be able to do that, I would ask them, how stressful is this really for you? You can use this 0 to 10 scale. You can use a different scale. You could say not stressful, a little bit stressful, medium stressful, very stressful, or super stressful. And if they say this is super stressful for me, you could think, okay, well, maybe we won't start there. So they're going to a new school for the first time. And the idea of walking through that new school on the first day is terrifying. You might say, let's drive by the school a couple times so we can get familiar with the route. Let's see where it is. Maybe you say, let's find out if we can take a tour of the school. Let's meet the counselor at the school. Let's set up some play dates for you with other kids who go to that school, or if your child is older, like let's see if there are any like social media groups related to the school to get you connected with, right? We start with small challenges and we work our way up towards larger challenges. As parents, we can also recognize if they're avoiding something, what is the purpose of the behavior? They're telling you, I never want to go back to practice, or I never want to go back to my science class. Why are they experiencing that? What is the thing that they're avoiding? If it's just one thing, if it's like, I really don't like baseball isn't my thing, but I will play a different sport or I'll do a different activity, I would say don't make a huge deal about it. But if they're saying, I'm going to start avoiding situations because I'm worried that I might make a mistake, there are lots of possible opportunities to make mistakes every day. This is not something that we can avoid. So rather than doing that, I would encourage them to be brave, to catch them being brave, to praise them really specifically, and not just like, good job today, but saying, I noticed that you did that even though it was really hard. Or I saw that you kind of took a couple breaths before you went on that stage. Or I saw how hard you were kind of practicing to kind of feel a little bit more comfortable and confident before you did that. Whenever they're feeling kind of anxious, I would ask them, what are some strategies that you'd like to try? What helps you? If they tell you, oh, I don't want to think about it, or I just want to play video games, I might say, okay, I can understand why you'd want to do that. I know how much you love video games. Are there any other things that help you to feel more brave in that situation? Not just avoiding the situation, feeling better right now, but when you're in that situation, what would help you? I have a lot of parents who ask me this question. What's the difference between reinforcement and bribery, right? Like, I don't want to bribe my kids. They should do all of the things they're supposed to do. I should not have to pay them to do stuff, right? And to that, I would say, do you love everything that you do all of the time? Does anybody love filing taxes? Ooh, we got tax season coming up. I'm going through my mental list of all the things I still have left to do. I am really, really lucky in that I love my job. I wake up every day. I'm one of those weirdos who's excited to go to work. I know, not everyone feels that way. I love my job. I would talk to people all day for free. I would not do paperwork for fun in my free time. It is not something that I would choose for myself. So when I think about why my work is a job rather than a hobby, I really think about the paperwork. If I wasn't paid to do the paperwork, I would not do the paperwork. Bribery is where the rules change, right? So you're if you do your chores this week, you'll get your allowance. If your child is I have decided I'm going to triple my rates. This week, you have to pay me 3 times my normal allowance to do the same chores. Do not negotiate with terrorists. Do not let them hold their positive behavior for ransom, right? If they say, I will only do this if, that's bribery. Don't do that. But I imagine that if you go to work, you know what's expected of you and what you'll be paid to do. If you did the work that you were expected to do and then your boss is like, I've decided not to pay you for this, you probably would not stay at that job very long. Or if your boss gave you a paycheck and you're like, I'm going to show up, but I'm not going to do the work, you probably would get fired, right? So reinforcement does not have to be monetary. Things that are really motivating, access to screens can be really motivating, or bonus screen time. I've had parents get incredibly creative with this and say, I know you've been working really hard to do this really difficult thing. I'm going grocery shopping on Saturday. I'm going to let you choose the outfit that I wear to the grocery store, right? So I've had parents going grocery shopping wearing superhero capes and tiaras and all kinds of fun stuff. It could be you get to choose the movie that we're going to watch on our movie night. It could be an activity. It does not have to be monetary, but most kids are motivated by money and screen time. That does not have to be the only thing that you're using for reinforcement. I promised you that we would talk about what happens if your kids don't seem, stressed enough, or they're putting off something that they need to do. Too little stress can lead to procrastination, which may be another fancy way of saying avoidance. For this situation, I would suggest taking a challenge and breaking it down into smaller steps. So if they have a big project to do for school, it may feel so overwhelming that they don't even know where to start. Rather than saying, you have to do it, just do it, I would say, well, let's walk through, what are the different steps? How hard are each of those individual steps? Well, first you have to identify a topic. You're a pretty smart person. Do you have any ideas? What are you interested in? What are you thinking about for this? You might notice that each of those steps actually feels a little bit more manageable. And you're not doing the work for them, but you're being kind of a really nice sounding board and letting them talk it through. It helps sometimes if we make a goal, if we say it out loud. So some of my clients will say, so even if my friend and I are working on something different, we will get together and we'll kind of study in the same place. And I will say out loud, I'm going to take a break as soon as I'm done reading this chapter. Or I'm going to take a break as soon as I'm done reviewing the notes from class from yesterday, right? Saying that out loud can be really helpful. Even if you're not monitoring everything that your child, your student is doing, you could say, if you want to let me know when you're done with it, I will celebrate with you. I'll be really glad to support you. Sometimes we have to work on something and we have no motivation to do it, right? I will fold laundry all day. I hate walking things to the washing machine. I don't know why. I will wash dishes all day, but I do not enjoy putting them away. The question is, what is your motivation? Some things that we do are just internally motivating. We do them because they're fun or enjoyable. Some things are not so enjoyable. One of the best examples I saw of this was in college. I had a friend who was studying next to me, and she literally had a textbook open, and she was a huge fan of jelly beans. I also happen to love jelly beans, and so was very envious of her jelly bean collection. But she literally took a jelly bean and she put it at the end of each paragraph in her textbook, where she had paragraph, jelly bean, paragraph, jelly bean, paragraph, jelly bean. And I was like, what are you doing? Why is there candy on your book? And she's like, well, I love jelly beans. I hate reading this textbook. I'm just trying to encourage myself to not be so angry at the textbook, to have something to look forward to. If your student has something unpleasant that's coming up, you may be able to make it slightly less unpleasant by saying, what could we do afterwards? I have clients who come to therapy who say, this is really hard for me to be here. We talk about stressful stuff. I'd rather be at home. And we try to set aside some time at the end of our session. How can we celebrate that you came here today and were really brave? I have an amazing, well-stocked prize bin, lots of lollipops. I have some like great Play-Doh stash. But I also have parents who will say, after your days where you meet with your therapist, I know that's hard, so we're gonna do something special for dinner that night, or we'll spend a little extra time together. We'll do something that feels kind of fun and relaxing after that. All right. Any questions about the thought-based strategies, behavior-based strategies? We're going to get into some examples together, but I'm happy to answer questions so far. If you think of a specific question that I haven't answered, feel free to pop it in the chat box for me, okay? All right, so let's practice. I've got a couple situations for you all here. Your child says that their stomach hurts and they tell you they don't want to go to school. What are some ways that you could help this particular child? What information do you need? What strategies might you use? Has this ever happened to you before?
Yes, parents tell me all the time their kids don't want to go to school, and how do you motivate them to want them to go to school?
I know you all are super smart parents. What would you do in this situation if this were your child? You can feel free to pop in any response in the chat box. Your child says, I don't want to go to school. I don't feel good.
So I've actually had this happen with my teenager.
Yeah. What do you do?
I actually, I started this when she was in elementary school. So it's like, okay, so do you really not want to go to school, and why not? And sometimes she's like, well, I'm too tired or I'm too stressed or whatever. So I kind of, and I don't know if this is right or not, but I made a deal with her years ago that if she needed a mental health day, I would give her one mental health day each semester. And as she's gotten older, she would be like, okay, mom, today I'm just really tired and I need a mental health day. And she sleeps or reads or does whatever it is she wants. And that one mental health day does wonders for her.
Yeah.
As for honesty, like, does it really hurt? Or do you really just not want to go to school? Are you stressed? Or is there other things going on? Just be honest with me. What's going on? And they're very vocal. I've learned that with my child. Ever since they start learning how to talk, they can express themselves pretty well.
I love that you're encouraging this conversation. You're like, talk to me about how you're feeling. Tell me how you're feeling. You're not shaming your child. You're not like, it's your fault for having a stomach ache. You're like, we all have bad days, right? Bad days. I have bad days. I mean, I have a good life and I have lots of good days too, but it's normal to have a bad day and it's normal to want a break. You are not responsible for administering a lie detector. Does your stomach actually hurt? I'll be honest, it might not matter whether their stomach really hurts or not, as long as you're like ruling out, like we're ruling out an underlying medical concern. You can always call their doctor or pediatrician, like, is this something we need to come in for? School nurses will tell you that this is the number one complaint they get. My stomach hurts, right? Bumps and bruises, sure. But oftentimes, students will go to the nurse when they're experiencing a really difficult moment, and the nurse can generally be a very comforting place. So it turns out in this particular situation, for this example, if you were to ask a little bit more, to get a little bit more information, a student will tell you, well, it turns out I have a test today and I'm really anxious about it. So getting more information can help us figure out what is the problem, right? And if they're like, okay, once a year, twice a year, I need a break, that's fine. If you're noticing it's every time they have a test, they don't want to go. There may be some situations that we can avoid, but we don't call it work refusal, right? We say you got fired from your job for not showing up. So it helps to have a good balance of acknowledging what your child is going through while also encouraging them to manage their distress a little bit. I would say start by validating, I'm sorry you don't feel well. If a friend called you and said, ooh, I'm really not feeling good today, would you say, I don't care? Would you say, that's your fault for not feeling well? Hopefully not. Hopefully you would say, like, that doesn't sound pleasant. Getting more information, like asking a little bit more, can you tell me what's going on? When was the last time you felt this way? I would encourage you to ask questions like, well, what have you tried already? If they are really feeling anxious about a test, is there anything that's helped you in the past? And then also, is there any way that I can help? I know it's scary and stressful to be feeling not so well, to be worried about a test. If they're staying home or they are avoiding school, I would say don't give them access to stuff at home that they wouldn't have during the school day, right? So I know when this happens in my house too, when my kid is sick, they just seem like the smallest child possible, and I just want to like snuggle them and do all those wonderful things. And then I've actually had my own kids say, sometimes I prefer being at home because it's way more fun than school. And I'm like, oh, we need to change things a little bit and make school a little bit more boring. Okay. I'm going to challenge you all with a new situation here. Your child is starting a new school and has a lot of worries about what it will be like. How would you help a child in this situation? Does anyone have any ideas or thoughts? Have any of you ever started a new school, a new job, a new city, a new relationship? Has anyone ever done anything new? What's helped you? And if you're like, I don't want to share this with everybody, in the chat box, there's a little drop down menu. Oh, it looks like you can't send it directly to me, but you can send it to Molly or Crystal, who can read it out loud.
We've lived in 4 states, so my kids have gone to 4 different schools. And one thing that we did was we tried to get in contact with a couple parents and meet with a group of parents and kids before my kids went to the first day of school, so that they knew somebody, at least one person, before they walked in the door. And we also did the tour, and we did do one change in COVID, and that's been the hardest one, just because you couldn't really do but in normal times, doing that so that they know 1 or 2 other kids, and then also for me, knowing 1 or 2 parents that already had kids at the school is very helpful, because they can show you the ropes.
Yes, and another parent in our chat had a similar idea. Introduce them to other kids who go to to the same school, right, or the new school. I love that. You can make a little like tea table about like, what do you think will be the same about your school? What do you think will be different? You can get kind of silly with this. Like, are you going to be going into a building? Probably. Will there be other students there? Yes. Do you think there's going to be a cafeteria? What are like the other like normal things that a school might have? Like media center, maybe a sports field. What might be different? Okay, so it's in a new city. Can we look at the website and try to guess what might be different? So you're not avoiding talking about this. You're actually having a conversation about it, but maybe at a slightly lower stress level. So normalizing. Wow, you moved to a lot of, I really appreciate that awesome comment. Thank you for muting yourself and sharing. You have done this move many times. It's normal to feel stressed in a new situation, or when you're somewhere that's unfamiliar, when you don't know what to expect. You can think about past experience. So if you've moved before, you could say, let's think about what's helped us in those past experiences. What do we like? What's been hard? You could also just ask them, when have you tried something new for the first time? How did that go? We can practice reframing this a little bit. Is there anything to be excited about with the new school? Like, what if there's an amazing person at this new school who you don't know yet, but has the potential to become a really good friend of yours? How wonderful would it be to like meet a teacher who becomes like a really important person in your life and like a great mentor? And then asking them that same question, like what might be the same and what might be different? I see a really excellent question about the middle of the night anxiety. We'll come to that. But let me pop to one more situation. All right, your child has a presentation in class and is feeling super stressed. Has anyone ever had a child feel anxious about a like school-related thing? Presentations are hard. Public speaking is hard. How would you help this child? What recommendations would you have? And by the way, I love doing talks like this, love them. Before every talk that I have to do, especially when they're in person, I feel like a little bit like I'm going to throw up, just a little bit. And then like it goes away once the presentation starts. So it's really normal to feel stressed in these situations. What strategies might you use? Class presentation, super stressful. Any ideas? Well, feel free to throw your ideas in the chat. I'm going to throw a few. Practice. Yeah. Okay, let's get used to this. Let's do the presentation. We can do it in kind of a fun way. We can do it in small steps. It may be really helpful to let this teacher know, by the way, my child is like looking forward to this presentation, but it's feeling a little overwhelmed by it. Teachers are used to navigating this problem. They may have suggestions. You can break it down into smaller steps. Let's do the presentation, just you and our dog. No people allowed in the room for the first time you run through the presentation. Now, like, let's crack the door a little bit, and I'm just going to sit right outside your room. You're not even going to see my face. You can even talk to the teacher and say, is it possible that my child could practice the presentation in the empty classroom, like maybe during lunchtime? Could they do like a quick run through with one of their friends during like their study hall? That might help a little bit. And then to ask this question, okay, what is the worst thing that will happen? Like, let's say you do the presentation and you forget what you're saying. Are you going to get kicked out of the school? Are they going to make you stand in like the auditorium and are they going to throw tomatoes at you? Like, really, what would happen? Are you going to spontaneously combust? Right? To really get into it, like, why, what makes this so scary? People might look at you. Okay, has anyone ever looked at you before? People might judge you. Judgy people are judgy. People are gonna think negative things. That's really nothing about you, right? And it may help to plan something to look forward to. I know how hard you've been working on this. Like, what would you want to do when the presentation is done so we can celebrate a little bit, right? Great question in the chat. How to handle when a kid comes in the middle of the night saying, I can't sleep, I'm anxious about school tomorrow. I would want more information here. What is it you're feeling stressed about? And maybe the middle of the night is not a great time to talk about it. So you could pull them aside another point and say, like, I've noticed you've been coming into my room a lot at night, telling me you're stressed. By the way, anxiety generally peaks at night. And why is that? Usually during the day, our brains are busy. We have a lot of other things to think about. And when nighttime rolls around, we have fewer distractions, we have fewer people to see, we have less activities, generally less structure in the day. Often at that time of day, our brain is like, it seems like you're free. I've been saving up a lot of anxious thoughts for you. Do you mind if I just kind of like dump them out right now? And so it's very normal for those thoughts to come up. I would, in the middle of the night, steer clear of getting into a long, drawn out discussion. I would not try to get into a everything's going to be fine, don't worry about it. Trying to reassure someone who's feeling anxious is like trying to take a pasta colander and trying to fill it with water. No matter what you say, it's not going to actually make them feel better. So I might just sort of acknowledge, like, I'm sorry you're feeling so stressed. It's actually really, really late. I know you need sleep. I need sleep. I love you. We can talk about this more tomorrow. I would direct them back to their bed. If you have a child who's getting out of bed a lot during the middle of the night, you could use what are called like pillow passes and say, so you've been coming into my room 5 times, 10 times a night. Let's see if we can limit that to 3 times per night. I'm going to give you, 3 pillow passes. You just take like a little sticky note or a piece of paper and you're like, here, when you come in, you can check in with me 3 times. If they are able to stay in their room for the whole night, you can have like a bit of a celebration the next day, right? So let's say you give them 3 opportunities to come check in with you and let's say they use 2 of them. You might say, ooh, good for you. You saved one of those pillow passes. You didn't come in 3 times. That's impressive. We're gonna have some toaster waffles this morning. Like, I know you love them. Throw a little syrup on there. Delicious. If they only use 1 pillow pass, then you might say, we're gonna go like a little extra special today. Like, just throw a little chocolate syrup on our waffles. Or if they use no pillow passes, you can reward them for being super brave. We're not looking for them to say, I'm not scared anymore. We're looking for them to say, I'm feeling worried about tomorrow, but I'm also able to manage that experience. It may depend on kind of how old your kiddo is. If they're really young, you might need to provide a little more support. If it's a high schooler or a little bit older, you might say, I would love to help you. Middle of the night is not the best time for me to talk about this, but maybe let's talk about it a little bit more the next day. All right, so when to get extra help. We're looking for level of distress, like how upset are they? How worried are they? How intense is that feeling? And level of impairment. How much is it preventing them from doing something they want or need to be able to do? Are they avoiding situations because of their anxiety, because they're stressed? Are they not able to function? They're not able to go to school. They're not able to spend time with friends. They're not willing to participate in an activity because they're feeling super anxious. You can always start by calling your primary care doctor. They'll probably have some really good referrals. If you're looking for a therapist, I would strongly encourage you to look for someone who uses evidence-based interventions, meaning there's a good research foundation that says this is an effective intervention for the symptoms that you mentioned. Cognitive behavioral therapy, I love it. It works really well for anxiety. It's super helpful. If you are looking for referral recommendations or resources, you can always reach out to me. I'm going to put my information here. And I do have a YouTube channel, which is weird. I never thought I would do this, but it includes some breathing strategies, mindfulness strategies, some meditation and hypnosis strategies. There's a nice one for helping with falling asleep at night. I don't get any kickback if you go on the YouTube site or not, but if you're looking for a tool to try, they're geared towards any age.